Hey leaders, let's talk about how to deal with quarrelsome Christians. Now, a quarrelsome Christian is that guy who just loves to debate theology and major on the minors. They can tend to be modern-day Pharisees who know a lot about the Bible but are missing the whole point. So here's what you need to do with them. First of all, avoid foolish arguments. Paul said this to Timothy. Again, he said, I say, don't get involved in foolish, ignorant arguments that only start fights. Leaders, don't major on minors or get stuck in the weeds with them. It's confusing to everyone, especially in a small group setting. Foolish arguments distract us from the most important stuff, and they keep us from truly pursuing God in our everyday lives. So as a leader, you need to avoid these kinds of arguments. A lot of times what you don't talk about, especially in small group, is just as important as what you do talk about. Don't get pulled into foolish arguments. Here's the second thing. You need to gently instruct these quarrelsome Christians. So just because you don't want to get involved in foolish arguments doesn't mean you avoid teaching these kinds of Christians. Don't neglect your role as their leader. Don't just sit back and say nothing. Be sure to share the truth. Be diligent about this. Don't lose heart. Don't give up. Back to 2 Timothy. Paul says, a servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but must be kind to everyone, be able to teach, and be patient with difficult people. Gently instruct those who oppose the truth. Perhaps God will change those people's hearts and they will learn the truth. See, Paul is saying to Timothy, Timothy, you're the leader. Make sure you give instruction. Now, a small group's really not the place to give that instruction. If you have a quarrelsome Christian, talk to that person after group or during the week or whatever. A couple more verses to encourage you. Galatians 6:1, dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, because this really is a sin issue, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. And later in verse 9, Paul says, so let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. Don't give up on a quarrelsome Christian. Gently instruct them with the clarity and confidence of a leader. And then here's the last thing. You need to recognize the spiritual battle that you're in. Back to 2 Timothy, verse 26, it says, then they will come to their senses and escape from the devil's trap, for they have been held captive by him to do whatever he wants. Now, almost certainly that quarrelsome Christian doesn't think that they're being used by the enemy, but they are. If they're focusing on the minors, if they're being Pharisaical Christians, they're going to be used more by the enemy than by God. And so this really is a spiritual battle, which means you should pray for them. You should recognize that you're not going to be able to convince them all by yourself. God is going to have to soften their heart. The Holy Spirit is going to have to move in them. Ephesians 6 says this, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on all of God's armor so that you'll be able to stand firm against all strategies of the devil. For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers of this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. So go to God, ask for his help in dealing with quarrelsome Christians.